Hi, real true education, not fake news. I raised my voice a little bit this time. It's the 26th of December 2021. St. Stephen's Day in Ireland. I don't know what they call it in America. It's Boxing Day in England. We're going to take another look now at the more direct evidence about the moon landings, right? We're not saying what particularly happened, but I want to clear away some of the myths so people can judge for themselves on what I've discovered. There's a film called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, and it's very dramatised. And there's a lot of good stuff in it. But one of the things that is copped in it is that they took a photograph out their circular window of the craft on the way to the moon, supposedly, of the Earth as a globe. So what they were saying was they were halfway to the moon, they turned the window, they put the camera up against the window like you would in an aircraft, trying to take a snap of a mountain or a ship, and they filmed the Earth. But what this film says is no, that was the ring of the window. The window was round, and so they could move the camera. Now you imagine you're trying to take a photograph from an airplane. You'll go up against the window. What they're alleging is they went the other side, and the camera was at the other side of the craft. It was shining through right across the craft and on the window, and the Earth was a big huge Earth. There was nothing else could be seen, only the Earth. But because the window was round, you got a lump of it which looked like the full globe, and it wasn't the full globe. That's what we're saying. And if it was night and day, indeed, that you still have the dark and the light in it. Now, to back that up is the fact that there's a work light. Like if I was here and you're the camera, there was a work light up here that came in. But the other thing is, now imagine I'm the camera here. Let's say this is the camera. This is a little paper punch. We say this is the camera. That should be right up here. There should be no possibility of anything coming between the camera and the craft window. But in fact, an astronaut's arm comes in like this. His arm comes in. And how could he get his arm in if the camera was up against the window? They're saying the camera was back here, the astronauts kept out of the way, there was a light up here, they had the light switched off, and then he accidentally put his arm in between the camera and the window. That's what they're saying, and there's evidence of that in those films. That would mean that the film of the Earth itself was faked. That's what that means. Now, the next thing then is David Percy made films as well, and he's a photographic expert. People say he's not an expert. Well looking at too, if you can get him. A lot of these videos have been taken down. They're monetized. They want to make money from them, even the YouTube and them. But David Percy has a lot of convincing evidence. There's a man called Bill Casing who had experience in rocket science, and he is also seen on these, and he says they never went. He says they put the possibility of getting to the moon and back at 10,000 to 1 before they ever went up there. Now, one thing I do not agree is the flag waving. I can find no instance where there's no hand on the flag and the flag waves. Now, if you move this here in the air, see the way it goes? The air will hold it, but if that's a heavy weight and it's even in a vacuum, the thing on the bottom will be slower than the top. And so I would expect if there was a hand on the flag and there's a beam out of a little aluminium beam and the flag would be light, you're going to get a bit of this no matter what happens. I cannot find any instance where the flag is just like that and it does this. No, I can't find that. They're saying there was a breeze there, which couldn't be on the moon. I cannot find that. In fairness to NASA, I cannot find it. Now, this is important. The rockets that lifted the lunar modules off the moon coming home when they were taking off were what they call they were hyperbolic rockets. They used a mixture of Arizon 50 and an oxidizer. And you can get examples of hypergolic rockets. A hypergolic rocket is where you bring two substances together that cannot stay together without exploding. They can't stay together. And a match works slightly on that principle. It's white phosphorus and it can't exist in oxygen without burning. Okay, so now this Arizine, and it should be an E in that, I see that here. This Arizine 50 right? Rocket mixture. It's fed into the rockets. There it's there. And you'll see it in Nottingham University, there's an example of it, but they're using a different mix, right? But when the two substances brought together, it fires the rocket, and because of that, on the moon's surface coming back, you're sure of ignition. Once you get the two together, you get ignition. Can't have it otherwise. It will not exist separately. And if you look at rockets using this system, you'll hear, just before the launch, you'll hear 5, 4, 3, 2, and just before 1, you'll hear a whistle. Whoosh! And that's very like a Halloween rocket. You know the way it screeches up into the air. That's what happens. There's a sort of a low explosive fire to bring a turbine round and pull down by means of for 2 hours the two substances out of the tanks and get them to fire. And that's that. You'll hear that sound just before ignition. You'll hear this wee. And then you'll see all the smoke, and then you'll see the whole place filled with smoke and it taken off. And watch the colour of it. There's a lot of colour, a lot of red colour. But what's been said by NASA and what's been said by supporters of the moon as being genuine is that there's no flame out of this. There's nothing, it's pure burn invisible. And this is something we might take more time at, but I cannot get any evidence. Now, this exact same type of rocket was used in the Titan II intercontinental ballistic missile and the Gemini civilian lunar space exploration manned flight. When they sent the men up into low Earth orbit, they used the Titan II for the Gemini and the Arizine. And you can search the internet there for the Gemini missions, Gemini 5 and Gemini 6 on them, and you'll see them taken off, every one of them, and you'll see the effect. Yet, if you go on I'm just talking here now, sorry, about the start phase of the hypergonic. This is the correct spelling here, hypergonic rockets. If you go on the internet here, you'll see the smoke. Sorry, you'll see the smoke created by Titan II rockets, but you'll also see the Apollo 14 and the Apollo 17 liftoff. When they were lifting off the moon, they had a camera, supposedly operated by Earth, with 1.3 seconds of a delay, supposedly operated by Earth. From Earth, and that's supposed to supposedly operated by a camera from Earth, by a controller from Earth. So as the rocket went up, they followed it right up. So how did they do that? I know they could do remote control of model aircraft at that time and everything, and you'd imagine they could, but don't forget they had to deal with a 1.3 second delay of the signal going up. It didn't matter about coming back. And when the rocket took off, they had to follow it. How did they get that exact in the case of 14 and 17? Now I'm going to show you here Apollo 17 liftoff, and you can get this yourself. And what you want to look for here, there's an explosion. Now, the way that the moon lander that contained the astronauts is cut away from the lower portion. Don't forget, you have the this is caught here. You have the rocket. See that there? That's what they're in, we'll say. But then there's a huge big thing underneath here, like the computer, huge thing like that, and they have to break this off. Do you get the point? It's caught here with a wire, but you have to get them off. The two's like this, and the way that's done is there's 4 bolts holding the two together, and they're broken by a high explosive. The bolts are done like this, so that when the high explosive goes off, these are held by a thread, and this blasted out in here. It blasts up here, and they have to break, and therefore you'll see the blast up from the rocket initially before it lifts off. But what I don't see is any evidence of the main rocket firing, any smoke. Even though it's a vacuum, you'd think there'd be some smoke. You'd think it'd go down and envelop the craft below. But as it rises up, you see the complete absence of any discharge from this rocket that lifts it. And there is a video online of the International Space Station filming the taking off of a rocket. This particular one is, I think it's a hydrogen or paraffin operated kerosene rocket, but it doesn't matter. You can see there's always a flame from a rocket burning in the distance, and if it's only a gas canister at night, you'll see the flame. It's for you to decide, but I just want to show you this here now. Now we watch what happens.
Proceeded 3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston. That's your good. X5. Pitch over. Roger, you have good thrust.
Now, you can get that. You can get that yourself by Googling or searching for Apollo 14 and Apollo 17 liftoff, and just look at it there yourself. And the other thing is that before both of those lifts off, those astronauts were walking around and there was sunlight and a big shadow. There was sunlight. And how come it suddenly got dark when they were doing that? How come there's no sign of the sun or anything there? Sorry now. Why is that? Now, you'll get several examples of the lift of the Titan II rocket, and we'll come back to this again with something else. But I find that strange how there's nothing out of those rockets going up. They say, oh, they're invisible, or it's invisible. Why does that one happen to be invisible? No other rocket I know of is invisible. And certainly, whatever about as it goes up, you'd think there'd be some burning out of it. It's up to you to decide. This is only part of the evidence. Now, we might look at a few other things in them. There is a video there of Apollo 14 on the moon itself. And you can see that the shadow is there. There's no stars in any of these, any of the stuff that was broadcast. And there's no stars. And you don't see the sun hardly ever. But there's one video there, I haven't it here now, where the sun is seen as a blue sun, and you'll see the shadows going in different directions. Now, some of the evidence of the shadows from the different from the sun say that there was several light sources which there shouldn't be, and some of it may not be true. Sometimes when you look at it where there's hills, but you can use your own judgment on that and go out on a sunny day and see it yourself. But certainly the Apollo 14, there's a scene on the moon which was made up. They used composite pictures. Okay, there's no doubt about that. They did fake the pictures a bit. That doesn't necessarily mean they didn't go. And we'll have a look at other things and that and see what the story is. It's a long time ago now. I'm not saying it was hoaxed, but there's a big possibility it did. There's a big possibility. I mean, no man mission to anywhere, like Christopher Columbus or any of these, ever went once and didn't go back. Maybe there's nothing there for them, but they never went back. Certainly the political will was not there because people didn't want money spent on this. They're starting to go back now a little bit. But the big thing, I think, the big thing for me is if they had sent up a mouse or a rat or a bird or something above low Earth orbit, put them in a comfortable position and let them up. I mean, they're experimenting on animals anyway. Put them in a cage, feed them, and let them right up and drive them up and put them up through the Van Allen belt and measure this. I can find no record of what the levels of radiation are in the Van Allen belt. And I can find no record of what there are up in the sky, but away above that. But all the scientists agree there is a lot of stellar, solar and interstellar radiation up there. That's atoms split in pieces, and they're charged particles, and they don't do you any good. Now, some NASA astronauts said on the moon they saw flickers in their eye with neutrinos going through and things like that, and charged particles. I don't know. When they came down, you'll see video there when the three astronauts came back from Apollo 11. Sir Patrick Moore was interviewing them for the BBC, and he asked them about the stars, and they said they never saw anything. Never noticed anything. I mean, they had the best view of the stars you could ever have up there if they were there, and yet they noticed nothing. The other thing about the stars is if they had to fake it and put a background like of the stars, like if they had to put, let's say, a background of stars like this, anyone could just superimpose another picture and prove it was a fake. See that there? I just wrote that with my hand. When I could never get that exactly right, that if you put another image that I made over it, there wouldn't be little blemishes. You'd have a star moving or something like that, moving, changing location. They never had any stars in the sky at all. And that's strange. So with that, folks, we might leave it. I don't want to be a complete conspiracy theorist, but when you look at it all, the case for the fact that they did actually go up there, it's weak enough. It is weak enough. I mean, they had the way to lift astronauts with cranes. They could have lifted those that lift-off craft with a crane, no problem, or a helicopter. And the other thing is that craft landed on the moon. All of those landed 6 times on the moon. They didn't do this once, they did 6 times. And yet there's no video anywhere of the lunar lander actually flying successfully on Earth. Neil Armstrong had to eject when one of them went wrong. You'll see it there if you see Neil Armstrong ejects from the lunar lander in America. So it's strange, and it's just worth thinking about. 20 million Americans don't believe they went to the moon. 20 million Americans out of a population of about 380 million don't believe they went to the moon. And certainly some of this stuff is with shadows and a lot of precarious things is a bit doubtful. I don't believe all of it, but I do think that what I've given you here is something that you yourself can judge for yourself. Their reflectors can be put on the moon. They can go to the moon now. They can come back from the moon, but they can't go above low Earth orbit in my view. And until I see an animal or a man or something going through the Van Allen belt and going into orbit, into space, or even go up a bit, you can go a quarter way to the moon and coming back safely, I'll have doubts. It takes a big amount of water to stop the radiation coming in, or lead, or bismuth, which is like lead. It takes about that much lead. And don't forget, if you go in to get an x-ray in the hospital, the people x-raying you will put a lead cover on you. In fact, if they're x-raying your teeth, they'll put lead around you here. That's to protect you from radiation. But the problem is taking lead up into space is very difficult. It's so heavy. It just adds to the payload, and that is a huge, huge problem. A huge problem. So folks, we'll see you back. Don't forget to comment, give me your views, give me a thumbs up and a thumbs down. And for the remainder of this festive season, a happy Christmas and a happy New Year to you, and coming in the future in good health. So it's worth a bit of crack anyway. I wouldn't trust government as far as I throw them on anything. I wouldn't trust them on anything. So we'll see you then back, and we'll let you go now on that. I just have to push this